8 million times a year.
Are you surprised by the scale of this?
I think all of us are surprised by the scale of this.
Someone boards a Milwaukee County bus without paying.
They know they're supposed to pay. They know how to pay. They just don't pay. And they do it because they can.
Now the transit system is rolling toward a fiscal cliff.
We can't have a bus system that's losing millions of dollars in revenue.
This week on Open Record,
at the end of the day, the bus riding public is going to suffer because of this mess.
A new plan to reduce fare evasion.
It's something that you'll see progress in inches, not miles.
And the surprise demand from the bus drivers union.
They should be allowed to collect fare. One time. That's all we asking for.
As MCTS tries to reverse a growing culture of free rides.
I said over and over, once you let this genie out of the bottle, it's hard to put it back in.
From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Bryan Polcyn, and I'm joined here by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
And we are joined once again by Contact 6's Jenna Sachs. Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
We are recording this episode on Thursday, September 4th, 2025. And as we record, it's been one day since the Milwaukee County Transit System pitched its 6-part plan to reduce so-called fare evasion on Milwaukee County buses. That is, riders boarding the bus without paying the required fare. We're going to explain why this issue is suddenly getting a lot of attention. It's not a new issue, but it is getting a lot of attention now. How much it's costing the publicly funded bus system, the impact that's having on bus service, and why bus drivers say they want to be a part of the solution. Plus, we'll be joined by a special guest who's been sounding the alarm on fare evasion for years. We're going to do all of that when we come right back.
We are back on Open Record. Our topic today is bus fare evasion. But Bryan, this has been a problem. It's not a problem that's new. It's been going on for years. So why has it become such a hot topic recently?
Well, this really came to kind of public attention, I think, mostly back in June. Although it depends who you ask. I mean, if you talk to the union that represents the bus drivers, they're in negotiations with Milwaukee County Transit. And back in June, those negotiations for a new contract were just getting underway. Right about the same time, they say, MCTS came forward to the county board and said, we are $11 million in debt, 10.9 to be exact. And board members said, what are you talking about? We haven't heard anything about this. In fact, the last we heard from you about 18 days ago, you said kind of budget neutral. Everything's looking good. All of a sudden, they're $11 million in debt. So for the members of the union that are about to go probably ask for raises, benefit increases, things like that, they think this looks a little suspicious. But as you look into the numbers, MCTS has come forward and said, yes, we do have this deficit. It is real. And they kind of broke down the numbers from there.
You know, where does the bus fare evasion factor into this deficit? Is it a big factor?
Well, initially, when MCTS first came out and started talking about the breakdown, they said that one of the issues was fare evasion. And they said that they had measured that at about a $4 million loss per year, that on average, they were seeing about 25% evasion. And that came out in a press release actually from the County Board of Supervisors, but they were referring to MCTS's numbers. And even at 25%, I wasn't aware of this. I don't ride the bus typically. So I thought, well, that means 1 out of every 4 people's not paying. That sounds like a lot. Well, it was even worse on the county's bus rapid transit system, which is a newer system. And for the first year, they were giving free rides on that. So when they started charging, a lot of people had gotten used to the free rides. And so there was an even higher rate of evasion. They said it was 33%. And so those numbers are alarming enough. I mean, $4 million, it's not all of the 10.9 million, but $4 million is a significant amount of money. But I was hearing from others who said, Bryan, it's worse than that. That's an undercount. You really need to go take a look at this more closely. And that's kind of how we got into this story.
And then, okay, so then you got the numbers but then you also went on the bus and saw for yourself. Like, it's one thing to see the numbers, I think. It's another to actually go, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here and making a little tally. And you're seeing the number of people that are getting on without paying.
That was kind of a first step for us, was to get on the bus and to take a look at what was going on, sort of to observe that for ourselves. But when this deficit was first announced, the county board said, they were stunned by this, right? They didn't know that it was going to be this bad. And that was at 25%. We go and we get on the bus, and what we're seeing, now granted, it's a snapshot in time. We're on a particular route at a particular time on a particular day. But what we saw right away was, I wondered, would we be able to tell? I didn't know much. How many different ways are there to pay? Do people have prepaid cards? Typically, when people get on the bus, they scan maybe a card, or they scan their app, and you hear an audible bling that, yes, the fare is good. Or they'll take cash and put it in a physical cash box. So you can see if someone is paid. Others hop on the bus and they walk right past the driver, or in some cases, they were scanning these cards or codes that would give a buzz sound, that, like a, like you've lost on a game show.
Yeah.
And that indicated that it was no good. But in every case, they would just get on the bus anyway. So we were seeing this over and over. And that's, I think, for me, when I realized this isn't just an occasional problem. This is every bus trip. We rode 3 different routes, all different parts of the city. They went from Wauwatosa to downtown, from Brown Deer to Marquette, crisscrossing the city. And we saw this everywhere we went. And I think at that point, I realized this is what we saw was, I think, between 43% and 64% fare evasion. And while those are snapshots in time, we thought, I do wonder if MCTS is keeping closer track of this behind the scenes. I wanted to know where they came up with those 25% numbers.
So I've ridden Milwaukee County Transit before. We used to live on the east side, and we would take the bus to the airport every now and then.
Yeah.
And I can see how easy it would be to just walk right by the driver. And I'm sure the driver doesn't want to start a fight or have conflict on the bus, so they might not say anything about it. But do we have an idea why people may not be paying? Is it just because it's so easy not to, or is it possibly because they can't pay? I know a lot of people on the bus are low income. Has there been any speculation as to why they're not paying?
Well, certainly there are, obviously the people who are riding the bus are people who don't have their own private transportation, right? So that's typically why you're on the bus. So you are dealing with typically people who are lower income. That doesn't necessarily, or you're also dealing with commuters, people going to work, a lot of people working downtown. So there's people from a variety of backgrounds who are riding the bus. Why they're not paying? Well, first of all, this isn't just a problem in Milwaukee. This is a problem for transit systems across the country. People, if they can get away with riding for free, they will. A lot of people, not everyone. Obviously, there's a lot of people who know that it's the law. You have to pay. And so they're going to do the right thing because that's how, law-abiding citizens tend to act. But there are some who either can't, and we certainly see people who were homeless or appeared to be homeless who are getting on the buses, and you can't expect that's a person who's got $2 to ride every time they get on. There are other people, though, who are getting on with full sacks of groceries and maybe, going from there and getting into an Uber, and the Uber costs money, but they're just walking on because they can. I saw people with tags that looked like they were working as maybe a nurse or a medical provider of some kind. They have a job, and they're getting on without paying. So in some ways, I think that the question of why they're not is really at the crux of this. Is it because they can't pay, or is it because no one's asking? No one's enforcing it. And you say, if everybody else is doing it, why should I? Or why shouldn't I?
So then why aren't, the logical thing in my head goes, okay, why doesn't the driver just look and say, hey, you didn't pay, or hey, that's $2 or whatever? Why? Like, how did that get to be where then they don't say anything?
Well, Jenna alluded to this earlier. You said that the drivers, they maybe don't want to get into a fight or a conflict. And certainly the operators of county buses do face a lot of trouble on the buses, a lot of conflict, violence, things like that. And it's something that comes up often in these contract negotiations. They want better protection. So, if you get into a lot of these buses, you'll see there's like plastic plexiglass that separates the riders getting on from the drivers themselves. That's designed to protect those drivers from people who might attack them. And then, of course, one of the primary reasons people get into arguments with a bus driver is a bus driver saying, hey, pay your fare. In the past, they used to do that. They used to at least ask for a fare. And there was a time when there was a policy that MCTS said, drivers, you can ask once, but don't get into an argument. Don't keep asking. Don't kick them off the bus. Let them ride. We don't need these conflicts. So ask once, then that's it. And in 2022, MCTS, still having a concern over these incidents with drivers, said, don't ask anymore. Just stop asking. And they say this was guidance that they got from the Federal Transit Administration, that for safety reasons, both for the drivers and for other people on the bus, that they felt it was better for drivers not to be a part of the sort of enforcement process. So don't even ask. If they get on without paying, let them ride. Now, what they're supposed to do in those cases is to press a button, and that button indicates no fare was paid. And they're supposed to do it right at the spot where the bus is, where this occurs, so they can get a GPS tracking on where most of these non-payers are happening. And then, in theory, the system could send security officers or other people to those areas to try to, boost enforcement or boost people who are paying. What we're hearing is, in reality, it's so common. It happens so often. And these drivers are just trying to keep their routes up. They're trying to stay on time, that they're not pushing the button at all. In most cases, they're just letting it go because it's just too much to keep up with. So that's what made me wonder, is 25% an undercount? And if so, what could the numbers really be? And we'll talk more a little bit later about what MCTS's data actually shows when we got that, and how they're collecting that data as to whether or not this 25% was an undercount. I can tell you a little preview, it was.
So is there a plan to address this problem or rectify the situation so we have more dollars coming into the county transit system?
So the county board did direct MCTS, or requested anyway. First of all, I should talk about how the bus system is funded here. MCTS is a sort of quasi-governmental organization. It's not government. It's separate from county government, but it is funded exclusively with government funds and fares. So federal funds, county funds, state funds, and then about 14% of its operation comes from the fares themselves. And since the county funds MCTS, it has some say in what goes on there. And so at budget time, what they can do, who they can hire, that sort of things, or how much. So the county board said, you need to fix this. This is a problem. Go back and come up with a plan. And we need that plan by September, because budget season is October. We need it now. So the board just came back on Wednesday, September 3rd, or I should say MCTS came back with a 6-part plan with a variety of strategies. And the first part of that is something they're already doing, and that is a public awareness campaign. You see on some of the buses now in the marquees, it says every fare counts, and they're sort of trying to get the word out, just reminding people, yes, it's important to pay your fare. They call it a public education campaign. We heard from people from the union who said that's useless. They know they're supposed to pay. They're just not paying. But the county says that's one they can do that's budget neutral. They don't need to spend a lot of money going out and doing this, so they're already doing that. There are other things. One of them is they want to make it easier to pay. Allow you to pay by credit card, debit card, Google Pay, Apple Pay. You can't do that right now. You either pay cash, or you can get a prepaid card, or you get an app that you have to download. And, if you have to download a special app, it's a whole extra step some people just don't want to take. So they're hoping this will make it easier. Other transit systems allow you to pay with a credit card, and other systems that do that. I know I've been on the subway in New York. It tracks if you use the same credit card, and there's fare capping. MCTS has fare capping. After a certain number of rides in a day or a week, then your fares stop if you use that same card. So those are things they're looking at. But then there are some other ones that I think we can talk about after a break, and that is the ones that are going to cost a little bit more money. We'll talk about that when we come back right after this.
We are back on Open Record. MCTS said it estimated fare evasion at 25%, but you, Bryan, found that was actually an undercount. What did you find, and how did you do it?
As we mentioned earlier, we got on the buses, right? We rode 3 different routes. It was Route 12 from Brown Deer to Marquette, Route 33 from Wauwatosa to downtown, and the Connect One BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, from the Watertown Plank Park and Ride to downtown Milwaukee. And we rode them on different days, all during the day. They were all weekdays. We found evasion rates from 43% to 64% on the Bus Rapid Transit line. Again, small sample size, but all of those were so much more than 25%. It really made me wonder, how is MCTS coming up with their numbers? So I requested through Open Records data that they were using and how they track the data on fare evasion. They're the ones who put in the press release almost as an excuse, well, hey, we're way under budget, and it's because people aren't paying their fares. They did cite other reasons, by the way. They said employee overtime and benefits and salary is out of control. And they said that the paratransit system, which is operated by a company called Transdev, is way over budget. And then they blamed Trump tariffs, saying that those are making vehicle parts cost more. But they said a big piece of it was, in fact, fare evasion. So if we're finding 43 to 64% and they're saying it's only 25, what's going on? Well, we got the data through Open Records from January through May of 2025, 5 months of data. And first of all, they explained how they calculated it. They said they were not relying on the bus drivers pressing that button, which was sure to be an undercount from what we were hearing. Instead, they were using what they call APC, automatic passenger count systems, that are present on 45% of the buses in the system and comparing that to actual fares paid. So they take the fares collected versus how many people were counted as getting on and off the bus, and do the math there. And then they extrapolated statistically out over the other 55% of buses that don't have those things and came up with estimates. Ultimately, what they found was across the system, 33% fare evasion so far in 2025. That's all routes averaged out 33%. We found some, and they gave us route by route. There were some routes where it was bad as 67%. And there were no lines where it was 0 or 5 or 10%. It was all at least in the realm of about 20% or more on every route, no matter where you were in the city. Again, 33% overall. Bus rapid transit was, in fact, I believe, above 40%. What really stood out to me, though, was they had given raw numbers. In those 5 months, 10 million people rode Milwaukee public transit. 3.4 million of them did not pay, according to MCTS's own data. Over the course of a year, at that rate, that's 8.3 million people riding for free, and at an average fare of $1.25. And I say that because it's $2 to ride, generally. $1 if you are a senior over 65, a child age 6 to 11, or someone with a qualifying disability. Then it's $1. On average, a lot more people are paying the $1 than the $2, so they say $1.25 a fare. Even at $1.25, that's more than $10 million of unpaid rides per year. We're talking about a system with a $10.9 million deficit. Now, it's not realistic to think they're ever going to collect all of that. And if they did, some of those people just wouldn't ride. So you're not going to get that revenue. But out of $10 million in unpaid rides, how much of that could they recoup? How much of that could they collect? That's what is right now in discussion with the county board.
But part of that, and I just keep thinking, so, the people that are getting on and not paying, okay, so they're not paying. And then the bus drivers don't/can't say anything. Okay, so now we're in this hole of almost $11 million. Okay, here's a couple things we're going to try. But also, like, if they don't ever get this money, these routes could probably go away. I mean,
well, and that's, we're already seeing that.
Yeah, right.
They've already cut back service, not routes, but they've cut back frequency.
Right.
So you wait for the bus for 25 minutes on a typical day, you might be waiting 35 minutes now. And for someone who's got to get to a job, that could make the difference between getting there on time or not. So I heard from a lot of people after the story who are faithful payers who are not well off, and they say, I'm paying my fare. Right. Why should I pay $20 a week to ride this thing and then lose my route? So I hear that side of the story. But Jenna, you did allude to the other side of the story, which is people who go, I can't afford $20 a week to ride a bus. I can't do that. So if they're not going to charge me, I'm going to ride until they, enforce it.
Force me.
But it's a service it's a service that the city has, the county has, that to use the service, there's an expectation that you have to pay. Like, I get it. I don't know.
But also,
like,
no one's hassling you. Like, the bus driver's not saying anything.
Yeah.
You see everybody else getting on.
And if I can do it once or
paying,
twice,
and you're on a tight budget, you're like, this is an easy way to save money, I guess. I'm wondering about the bus drivers union. Do they have an opinion for how to fix this?
I think this was one of the more surprising things. And I think our guest, Dan Sebring, who's a former county supervisor, is going to be interested. I'm interested in hearing what he has to say, because it seems to have been a flip. A 180-degree flip by the union. Years ago, the union was, for the reasons we said earlier, they didn't want their bus drivers engaging with people and enforcing the fares. They want security on there doing that. But now that it's been completely taken away from them, what happens is a lot of these drivers, they see what they might refer to as the freeloaders getting on the bus, and it frustrates them because they say sometimes those are the people who misbehave the most.
Yep.
And so they want to do something about it, but they're not allowed to say anything. Well, guess what? Sometimes we're human. You say something because you're upset. And then the person you say something to, you get into an argument, and then maybe they get off the bus and break a window. Right. And guess who gets in trouble? The bus driver for asking, because the policy was don't ask. So they're seeing drivers who are getting suspended or having, some sort of action taken against them, some sort of discipline for just trying to ask for the fare people are supposed to pay. So now the union is saying, we want our drivers to be able to ask for fare at least once. Let's go back to the ask once policy. The vice president of Amalgamated Transit Union 998 was in the chambers yesterday when the county was meeting about this, and he said exactly that. We want them to be able to ask at least once. The new CEO of MCTS, he's been on the job 8 days, nine days as we record on Thursday, and he said, we will not compromise safety to to close a budget deficit. Safety is not on the table. And I wondered if that meant he was saying we're not going to change this policy. So I interviewed his next in command, the interim CEO he just replaced, who was her name is escaping me, Sandy Kellner. And I talked to her outside the chambers, and Sandy Kellner, I said, so is he saying this is off the table? And she said, no, it's not necessarily off the table. It's part of the discussions we're having right now. So they are in discussions. But I found it interesting that the drivers, who would actually be the ones who end up facing the risk of some sort of an argument or violence, are saying, give us the power back to say something.
Yeah.
We want to at least be able to engage and ask for a fare. Because I think a lot of people, if they're asked, would go ahead and pay. But they added one thing to that. They said, we want security.
I was going to ask about so security, we talked about it a little bit, but like, what does that plan look like? I know security costs money. And so, possibly not on every route, but what does their plan look like for
They
security?
certainly can't afford it on every route every day. But
Right.
what we're hearing is MCTS's plan is to spend $1.1 million on security officers. They already have a new in-house security staff. They used to contract out. They now have both contracted security and an in-house security staff that they say is growing quickly. But they're not necessarily doing any fare enforcement. They're checking into issues of violence or crime or other things that are happening on the bus, problems on the bus. The bus drivers are saying, let's get those guys out there and have them enforce fares, have them come out and deal with some of these things. So they want to see more of that. MCTS is saying we can spend $1 million on security officers to enforce fares, and then another $1.2 million on hiring. I think they said it was something like 13 or 19. I don't remember how many the number was exactly, but fare ambassadors, people who would be civilians in, as they put it, brightly colored clothing, friendlier clothing. They called it a softer approach than enforcement, but they'd be there to educate riders on how to pay, remind them they should pay, help them with problems, maybe help people with disabilities get on and off the bus. Sort of, they're ambassadors. They're there to be a positive influence on the system and help people out. The union said fare ambassadors aren't going to do anything. They're not going to help people pay. They want more enforcement. They're not as wild about the ambassadors. MCTS is saying, let's try both. Let's have some of both and see how this goes. But because those cost money, to try to recoup money, the county board has to sign off on this, and they have to do the math here and say, how much do we think we can collect in doing this? And is it going to offset the $2.3 million you want to spend?
I mean, I think a fair ambassador would work on me, because all I need is a little side eye, like, you're not doing the right thing, rather than just breezing through. Maybe just that little extra attention would help. But then I also wonder about security. Then are they armed, and is there going to be more conflict involved? There's probably a lot of questions to be answered about that idea as well.
I mean, there are people with the union who say we want sheriff's deputies back on the bus. That's a whole other can of worms.
Right.
But obviously for drivers, they want more help with what they're seeing, and they do want to be involved in a way that maybe they haven't in the past. One other thing I wanted to say about this, which is you've got obviously the questions about what's going to happen with all of these strategies going forward. They're already doing sort of the public relations campaign and that sort of thing. But you did ask about the people who can't pay, because there are people income-based who can't. Sean Rowland, who's one of the supervisors who actually called for this report, for this plan, he said, come find a plan, bring it back to us. He, in an interview with me, said he thought there might be an appetite for exploring some sort of an income-based ride-free card or ride at a discounted rate type card, where you've got to prove that your income is
hardships or
you
whatever,
have a hardship or something that means you can. Now the question is, what does that do to revenue? Because I think there was something like that in years past, and they found that something like 30% of the people riding the bus had one of these cards. Well, if you have 30% roughly right now that are not paying, are you just trading illegal free riding
moving
for
things
legal
around to a
free
different
riding?
bucket.
I think those are questions that'll obviously be things that come up in the upcoming budget discussions that are going to be happening in October. And in the meantime, you've still got the union negotiating with MCTS. So all of this is happening at a time when there are these budget discussions, or I should say these contract negotiations. Yeah. So you can't really look at what's happening without understanding that it's through that lens of they're trying to come to an agreement on what to pay the drivers and what other requirements are in that contract. That's still sitting out there. That expires September 30th, and that's already after one extension. The drivers have voted previously to say they're willing to strike. They don't want to strike. They say it's a last resort, but they're willing to if they have to. So there's still more to be figured out here. There's a little turmoil right now, certainly with the county bus system. And as we've talked about, this is not a new issue, Our guest has been waiting long enough. We're going to bring him in right after this break, a former county board member who says he's been blowing the whistle on this for years. We'll be joined by Dan Sebring, former Milwaukee County Supervisor, right after this. Welcome back to Open Record. We have a guest with us today is Dan Sebring, former member of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, joining us via Zoom. Dan, thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Now, you were on the County Board of Supervisors. Tell me roughly when you were elected and how long you were there.
I was elected in 2016, I believe it was, and I was there. My final year was 2018, and after that, I retired from the board.
Did you have any other political experience prior to that, or was this kind of your one stint in public service?
As an elected official, this was my first experience. I'd run for Congress in the 4th District prior to that.
What drove you to run for county board in the first place?
It was suggested to me, number one, by another board member. So I guess you could say I was recruited by another conservative board member. And I was also friends with my predecessor, Mark Borkowski.
I do want to point out, by the way, that we invited MCTS to be on this podcast. We also invited Amalgamated Transit Union 998. Didn't hear back. Well, we did hear back from MCTS. They said it was a late notice, so they couldn't provide someone, and I did not hear back from the union. Dan, you reached out after seeing the story, and you said you should check your own archives because this has been an issue before. And sure enough, in 2018, FOX6 News did a story all about you calling on MCTS to do something about fare evasion. Tell me about that. I believe that was about 7 years ago, 2018. Tell me why you made an issue of it and what happened at that time.
At that time, I had a number of constituents who were actually bus drivers. And they called my attention on this subject that they're only allowed to ask for the fare one time. And they wanted to be able to collect the fare. And they were getting in trouble for asking more than once, number one. And number two, that there was a large amount of people that were not paying the fare.
And what did, when you brought this up, you raised attention to this issue. What kind of response did you get at that time?
It was pretty cold, actually. Nobody really wanted to do anything about it. I asked for the numbers from MCTS, and I got numbers in dollars and cents. And at that time, they were losing $28,000 per month, or $337,000 a year on fare evasion. And I saw that as unacceptable. So I wanted to find out what could I do about it. I consulted with Corporation Counsel on the county board, and I was told that due to the nature of the public-private organization that MCTS was, that the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors actually has no say in the day-to-day operations of MCTS. So I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do about this? Something needs to be done. And what I was told was that I can't compel MCTS to collect a fare. But what I can do is compel MCTS to deny service to people who do not pay. And that's what I tried to do.
And tell me about what happened with that.
Well, it never made it out of committee is what happened with that. It was poo-pooed all the way around. I was the only person that was in favor of it. And one of my colleagues actually accused me of trying to criminalize passengers on MCTS.
I'm interested in the perspective of the drivers who were coming to you. Were they worried about their livelihood? Were they worried about their safety? What was it that prompted them to speak to you about the issue?
Well, number one, they know where the money comes from. They get paid, part of their job, whether the union agrees with it or not, but part of their job is to collect that fare. If you go to a restaurant and you order food and the waitress brings you food, and at the end of the meal, they give you the bill, and 9 times out of 10, your server is going to collect that money. What's the difference? So they saw that, number one, their income was in jeopardy. And number two, they know that their funding comes from the taxpayers other than from the passengers on the bus. And a couple of them saw this as a pretty egregious waste of the taxpayers' money.
Dan, I thought it was interesting. You said the numbers they gave you, and this was just 7 years ago, were $337,000 a year. And in June of this year, they said it was $4 million a year. And then I look at the numbers and say, it looks like $10 million a year. Are you surprised by these amounts?
Actually, I'm not. It was a mounting problem, and they went ahead and created this culture of not paying. It didn't help that they had the BRT, which was a concept when I was on the board, but to give that away for the first year, now you've got all of those passengers believing that they don't have to pay, even when they were told that, okay, the first year's free, but now you got to pay. They're still not paying, at least half of them. And, so we have this big culture now of the bus is free and there's nothing they can do about it. So I'm just not going to pay.
Dan, I do wonder, we were talking earlier about when I rode these buses, and I don't ride the bus often, you see people who are commuters, you see people who look, they're doing just fine. And then you see other people who you can tell life has been tough and life is tough right now. And I go, I look at that person, I go, I can be pretty confident that person doesn't have $20 a week to ride the bus, may not have $2 for one fare. There has been discussion about the possibility of some sort of an income-based card or pass or something like that. What are your thoughts on that? I know you're not on the board anymore, but do you think that's a concept that is worth exploring?
Certainly. I think that's worth exploring. And when I proposed my ordinance to require MCTS to deny service who didn't pay, there were exceptions that went along with that were at the call of the driver. The driver could decide on their own that this person doesn't need to pay. So if they were to establish a program where people who qualified for a free ride could get a free ride, I'm not saying nobody should ride for free. There's always an exception.
What were your concerns back when you were on the board about the domino effect of not paying these fares? Because it does impact routes. We've seen them being reduced, could affect the livelihood of the drivers. Were you concerned about that domino effect?
At the time, I actually thought I was going to be able to accomplish this, so I wasn't really looking into that particular aspect of it. But it certainly is there. Like I said, they've created this culture, and now they have to deal with it. And it's pretty much out of control.
So the 6-part strategy that MCTS has already begun, obviously part of it, the public education, they're looking at certain security, the fare ambassadors. Do you think that that's a feasible option? Is it going to work? Are they going to be able to recoup some of this money?
As it's proposed, I would say no. I haven't really seen a lot of it. All I know is what I've heard through discussions with you all. But while I was on the board, subsequent to my getting shot down, one of the concerns the drivers had, or the union had rather, was the safety of the drivers. And I actually had a study done to find out what it would cost to create a transit police division in the sheriff's department. And that was at the time just prohibitively expensive. It was going to add another $6 million per year to the cost, to the budget. And I don't even recall what the cost was going to be to initially establish that division. But it was something that I also tried to address that just wasn't going to happen. Those numbers might work now, but I kind of doubt it. But there was things that could have been done that weren't done, and things that they wanted done that I tried to get done that nobody else on the board wanted to do. What
about this concept of fare ambassadors? What do you think of that? Because it seems like they want to do a mix. They want to try a mix of security and these fare ambassadors. But I did hear them use the term, it's a softer approach, but they think that that's a proactive approach that might encourage, especially the people who are just saying, well, if nobody else is, I won't either. I'm not going to pay my fare. But they think that would help some of those people, encourage them to go, all right, yeah, there's somebody here. They're watching me. I'm going to pay the fare.
You know what? That might work for a couple of people. I think that having a fare ambassador would be probably a big mistake. It's not going to affect that many people. And now you're putting civilians in harm's way, people who aren't actually employed by MCTS or the county. And, you need people on that bus with the authority to make people pay. That's the key right there is they have to have authority. Somebody just standing there saying, "Oh, pretty please pay the bill." That's not going to go.
To be clear, I should say the proposal that they made yesterday did involve them being MCTS employees. In fact, I think they stated a salary of $94,000 a year. So I can see some people going, "Oh, I'd like that job." I don't know if I would like that job or not. But because some of the difficult situations you might interact with, but nonetheless, they're talking about that. Again, that's I guess stuff that will be the subject of budget discussions. You mentioned that the union, there was bus drivers who came to you who wanted you to look at this, individual bus drivers, but then the union at the time said, we don't want this. We don't want our drivers getting attacked. And now the union is saying, hey, let our drivers ask at least once. Were you surprised by that turn, that what seems to be somewhat of a 180 from the union?
Yes, I do find that surprising. Their position was the exact opposite when I was on the board. They wanted nothing to do with fare enforcement whatsoever. Their position was, our job is to drive the bus, not collect the fare. And like I said previously, there's plenty of jobs where you're in a service industry where you're providing the service and you're responsible for collecting the money that goes along with that. And it's very surprising that they've made the 180 on this. And I would imagine that a lot of the drivers are stepping up to the union and saying, hey, we need to do this. We need to have some say in this.
You know what I've heard a lot of people say, and I'll kind of wrap it up with this. I heard a lot of people say, especially on an individual basis, it's $2 or maybe $1. And somebody goes, well, I'm not going to risk my life as a bus driver over $2.
Sure.
But $2 times 8 million or $1 times 8 million is a lot of money. I wonder if it's just the fact that on an individual basis, it seems like peanuts, but over an aggregate amount of time and number of people, it's a large amount of money.
It is a large amount of money. And I think maybe back in the day when they were saying they don't want to do this over $2, that they were only seeing it as $2. Whereas I was looking at it as at the time, the number was $337,000. That was too much back then. Now it's just completely out of control. And it's something that I think they've come to realize that it is more than $2.
Well, Dan Sebring, a former Milwaukee County Supervisor. If I understand, you have is it an auto repair shop? Is that right? That's your trade?
Yes.
And that's still going well?
Oh, I sold that like 3 years ago.
Even better. Even better. Well, anyway, former auto repair shop owner and former Milwaukee County Supervisor Dan Sebring, thank you for being here on Open Record.
My pleasure.
We'll take a break and we will go off the record right after this. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question. Well, we know the rest. Sarah's done it. Because last time you just completed it for me. So anyway, Sarah has the question.
Did.
We haven't prepared, all that sort of thing.
A lot, yada, yada, yada. Lovingly. Okay. So, I don't know. I feel like food, we always gravitate to food. It's just easy to talk about. Before you go to a new restaurant, do you look up the menu so that you can look at the options before you get to a restaurant that you have not been to ever?
Like if we're deciding between restaurants, yes. But if someone just says we're going to meet there, no matter what, then no, usually not.
Yeah, I think like if there's an invitation to go somewhere, that's where we're going. I'll see the menu when I get there. I agree with that. If we're trying to figure out, does that seem like a good place to try? I'll look because I want to know, what do they offer? What are the prices? What is does it look like they've got some different stuff?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
You
have a problem?
Here's my problem.
You have a problem with looking at the menu first?
No, I don't have a problem. Okay. I am in like the other camp. I always look at the menu because here's my problem. I'm usually going with someone. So a friend, a group, my husband, whatever. My problem is I sit down and I start yapping. And then I don't ever look at the menu. And then by about the fourth time...
you're just trying to pre-order?
Yes. So that when I get there, I maybe just glance and just double check, because my problem is if I'm yappy, the waiter or waitress comes over, I then panic order, not really having read the menu. And then it comes and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that isn't what I wanted. Yeah. But at least if I can pre-screen so that I can have more time to yap.
See, I have the opposite problem where I'm like, don't talk to me.
Oh, see, you're better than I am.
I need a minute because this is an important decision for me, and I will
Waiters
get
and
to
waitresses across Wisconsin, thank you.
Yes, they do.
I was a waitress, so maybe that's part of it. But also, like, I'm really interested in what the menu has to say.
Okay,
so
yeah.
You're just gonna have to wait till I'm ready.
See, it's funny that you talk about that because we all know, I don't know if you're this person or if you know this person, but it's the person who, when the waiter or waitress comes to the table and the server says, "Are you ready to order?" They say, "Oh, I'll be ready after they go." Just come to me. Just come to me last.
I do that. But the part of the problem is that if it's usually it's with my family. And so I have a 12-year-old and a 9.5-year-old. And the thing that I have this control thing where I'm like, okay, do you know what you want? Okay. Make sure you look. Okay, now do you know what you want? And then by the time the server comes back around, I realize I have never looked for me.
Right.
So don't worry. Everyone else in my family knows what they want.
Oh, so that's a mom thing. You're trying to help the kids pick out.
Yeah. And so then by the time they're like, do you know what you want? And okay, I'll be ready by the time everyone gets.
I'm pretty easy to please, though. Like, I probably don't have to read the whole menu. I can probably find one thing that I like and just stop. Often,
Yeah,
if,
but
like,
there's so many other options.
I
What
know.
if?
I don't like it when someone
Menu
says,
FOMO.
here are 3 places. Why don't you check them out and tell me which one you want to go to? I'm such a middle child. I'm like, can't you just pick?
Oh.
And I'll show up and I'll find something because I'll look at the first menu and go, that's fine. Let's go to the first one on the list you sent me.
But they're like, didn't you see that third one? They have a really good.
I know.
And you don't. Okay.
I just don't. I think that's just the middle child in me. I just don't care where we go.
Okay.
I'll just be there.
All right, here's my question. You were a server. So
Yes.
when you come to the table and you say, "Are you ready to order?" and someone goes, "Oh gosh, let me think." And they're pausing and you realize they're now just looking at the menu
Yeah.
as you're. How long do you wait before you go, "You know what, I'll come right back"?
3 seconds. Oh.
It depends on like how busy you are. Sometimes you're grateful if someone's not ready because you have
You can
something
take a-
else to do.
yeah.
But then I might punish them accidentally by having to wait a bit longer than they'd like because I'll get caught up doing something else. I wasn't the greatest waitress. There was a lot of multitasking involved, and sometimes I'd be like, "Wow, they really haven't gotten their food yet," and then I'd be like, I didn't rush order.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, the kitchen, man.
Oh,
the
so
kitchen.
bogged down.
So slow.
Yeah, but they're really bogged down back there. I wonder with this too when it comes to the if you go out with multiple people now. Of course, in this modern age, we have Venmo.
Yeah.
So somebody will do I'll pick up the tab. You guys send me money. Are you the person who does that? Or are you the person who goes, "Oh, I'll Venmo you"? And somebody like. Where are you on that?
I pick up the tab.
You pick up the tab and say Venmo me.
Yeah, it's just easier because I hate the hemming and the hawing, and everyone's like, "Well, no, it's okay. It's no problem. I'll do it. No, it's no problem."
I get it. You're a
I just take charge
because that's what you are. You're a take charge person at work, everywhere else. But here's my question then: is how long do you wait when someone who is in the group hasn't paid you to go? "Oh, hey, from dinner yesterday," or do you let it go?
I feel like you let it go.
Yeah, I gotta let it go. Like especially if it's like friends, I'm like, look, at some point the favor will be returned, or if not, maybe they just needed that meal real bad. But usually it's been pretty good where like everyone will literally pull out their phone right away because they even say they go, if I don't do it right now, I'm gonna go home and get sidetracked. I'm gonna forget. So they usually are very good about just going, all right, I'm just gonna Venmo you that $32 right now. And then
Now here's my other one. You're with a group and you had a salad.
Oh,
and they ordered 3 appetizers you didn't eat, and they had 2 cocktails and whatever, and then they do why don't we all just split it?
Then we split it. This happens to me all the time because I don't drink a lot of alcohol. So everybody else has their fancy drinks and I have a water. I just pay the even portion. Divide it up evenly and I'll pay it because it's about being with the people usually.
Yeah.
More than the amount of food I ate.
So invite Jenna to your next night out because
She
you're
will
going to get a discount.
with you.
Yeah. But that's fine. Other people might matter more, It's
to
just
me,
the
it's
individual
more
thing.
of like if the restaurant has a policy where like we don't split the check, then look, I'm not going to put up a stink. If it's a place that would split, I might say like, oh, hey, can we just all get separate bills? Because at times, like we'll go out with maybe my mother-in-law or my.
I'm looking at Jenna, who was the server. Can we split them all? And you have a table of 12 people, and you're not sitting with each
I'll
other.
just say right now, I was not capable of doing that.
Well, and then there's some restaurants that will split it evenly. Like, hey, just divide this by 4. Some will go, oh, I'll just itemize it. It truly depends. And again, I'm not going to push either way. Like, I'm just thankful to be there. But I do think that it's like, if my family of 4 comes out with you and you're just coming by yourself, it's not reasonable for me to be like, let's all just split it. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. When you have a server who says, they don't write it down because they're the I'll remember your order thing.
Yeah.
And then oh, no, I can remember the order. And then they come back and go, did you say you wanted to do whatever? And I'm like, just write it down. I'm not impressed. I mean, it's cool. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But just write it down. Anyway,
Love it.
we will take a break and wrap things up when we come right back. By the way, last week we promised you most hated songs. You said another one?
Arms Wide Open by
Creed.
Creed.
And you said, what did you just say?
Closing time.
Closing time.
Yeah.
Somebody told me Sister Christian, anything by Motorhead, anything by Nickelback, and the song Africa, among others.
I love it.
Anyway, that's all the time we have for this week. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss on Open Record, an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. Thank you to Sarah, Jenna, Tim back there behind the TV screen, and Dave Machuda, our editor. With that, I'm Bryan Polcyn. We'll be back next week.